8 in your text, right-hand column, and we left off right around 1014, 1015, where the poet alludes to problems within the family. Okay? Fairly those kinsmen, line 1014b, fairly those kinsmen took many a full mead, kept stout-hearted in the high hall, Hrothgar and Hrothulf. Heorot within was filled with friends. No false treacheries did the people of the Scyldings plot at that time. Okay? And your gloss tells you that that passage implies that at some later time there was discord between the Scyldings, among the Scyldings, let's say, or between Hrothgar and or his heirs and Hrothulf. And we know from Old Norse sources that when Hrothgar died, some Old Norse sources, when Hrothgar died, his nephew Hrothulf became king instead of his eldest son Hrethric. Okay? And then your gloss tells you many scholars assume that the story of some sort of treacherous usurpation was known to the audience. This gives a special urgency to much of what happens in these scenes of feasting, especially the speeches of Wealhtheow. This gives a special urgency, blah, 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 blah. Well, what does that mean? It means that, I think it means, that when Wealhtheow speaks, she is speaking kind of in tongues. What do I mean by that? She means one thing on a surface level, she means something else a little bit deeper. Okay? In other words, there's multiple audiences for what Wealhtheow is going to say in a few minutes. So, 1020 and following, we find out Hrothgar told Beowulf earlier, if you do this thing, he says, you will not want for wealth. Okay? So he gives Beowulf a bunch of treasure. Now remember, Beowulf already has treasure from his grandfather on his mother's side, Hrethel, right? He's got a sword of Hrethel. Well, now is being given the blade of Halfdane, Hrothgar's father. So he now has two really old family heirlooms. I mean, not his own family, but other families' heirlooms. Okay? Swords are very important in Germanic culture, especially if the sword is named. And we get two named swords within the poem. Okay? So he gives them a whole bunch of other stuff, which I'm going to skip a little bit, including a helmet. And the helmet has a ridge on the top, and on the ridge is a boar. Okay? Actually, that's going to come later, I think. So, pick up with what's called fit 16, or the numbers there are delineating what are called the fits within the poem. Fits, F-I-T-T-S. Think of it as like chapters or, books kind of thing. So, 1050 and following. Hrothgar orders all these treasures to be given out. He does. He orders then treasure to be given to Beowulf's men. Why? How much aid did they provide Beowulf? Big goose egg. None. They didn't do anything. But this is participation trophy. They tried. They did their best. They came after all. Okay? Louder?
One of them died.
One of them died, and I'm going to get to that right now. And then he ordered that gold be paid, line 1053, for the man whom Grendel had wickedly slain. Gold be paid. Wergild. Hrothgar is following the law. Okay? He is making sure the man who is killed is properly compensated for. That is, the treasure given for the guy who was killed will be given to his family upon their return to the land of the Geats. The guy who was killed, by the way, he is named later, and his name is Hondshu. handschuh. Or modern English, hand shoe. Well, what the hell's a hand shoe? What is a shoe that you put your hand in? A glove. Okay? Which in Old English is spelled Glof. Which, when Beowulf returns to the land of the Geats, and he tells us what happens to Handschuh, and he tells us his name, we're also going to be told what Grendel does with people. He stuffs them in a big something that he has hanging out his side made out of dragon skin. And this thing is called a glove. So, Handschuh, glove, okay? The part of him that doesn't get eaten gets stuffed in the glove. I think that's Old English humor. It kind of falls dead on us, but I imagine guys sitting around the table, probably after they've quaffed a few beers, okay? And bear in mind, their beers would not be like our beers, our modern sissy, very low gram. I mean, these would be potent beers, and they wouldn't be drinking, 11.2 ounces. Bowls. I mean, we know what some of their bowls were like. I mean, you held them like this. Put your elbows together, put them like, and you sit there and you just, splash it down your face. Okay? To be an Anglo-Saxon. So, he orders, the gold to be paid for him. He would have done more. That is, Grendel would have done more. 1056. If wise God and one man's courage had not prevented that fate. Notice, he would have done more. What does the poet then do? He gives credit to God and to Beowulf. Why? Because they are working in synergy. And we get that word bandied all about today. Like, we got to work synergistically, blah, blah, blah. What does it mean? In tandem. Sin does not mean sin. It means with, together. Okay? Energy together, acting kind of on the same timeline. But notice, does Beowulf know what God's doing up here? No. Does God know what Beowulf's doing down here? Yep. What we talked about the other day with God's perspective, the point. So, the poet then goes on. Gnomic passage. The Maker ruled all of the race of mankind, as he still does. That's almost exactly like that line we had earlier, line 700. It is a well-known truth that mighty God has ruled mankind always and forever. Notice the later instance of that, as he still does, is more specific than always and forever. Always and forever is kind of a generic, he's got the whole world in his hands. As he still does means what? Right now. Does. Present tense. Okay? He ruled, past tense. He is still ruling right now. I think this is the poet kind of saying something to his exact specific audience at the time, either one, when the poem is created, or at the very least, two, when it is copied in the manuscript that we have. Sometime around 975 to 1025. Well, between 975 to 1025, you've got Vikings causing problems in England. And when you go after 1014, specifically 1016, you have a Viking on the throne of England. Okay? Who wouldn't necessarily be fully fluent in Old English. He might understand some, because Old Norse and Old English are similar. I took a independent study in Old Norse the same semester I was doing Beowulf as a doctoral student, which was helpful at times, and other times it was not helpful at all because it led off, diverging ways. So, the Maker ruled all of the race of mankind as he still does. Therefore, okay, anytime you get a therefore, what does that mean? I'm drawing a conclusion for you. I'm now going to make it applicable. So, therefore, understanding is always best. Spiritual foresight. Spiritual foresight, that's an appositive for understanding. The poet wants us to understand what he means by understanding. Spiritual foresight, that is, seeing with the eyes of faith. Not closing your eyes and, crystal ball gazing into the future kind of a thing. What's the spiritual foresight? He must face much, both love and hate, who long here endures this world in these days of joy, blessedness, happiness, in these days of what? Strife, toil, work. So, if you endure for a long time in this world, what will you face? Love? And yesterday afternoon in Miami, Florida. Love and hate. It's not all bad. There is some good. But the good gets tinged with what? With the bad. And then it's like the poet goes, oh, I'm on a soapbox. I better get back down. Meanwhile, back in the story, noise and music mingle together. And the poet, within the poem, the Hrothgar's shop, okay, sings a tale. What kind of tale? Love and joy? Suffering in these days of toil? What's the tale? The tale is called the Finnsburg, sometimes it's spelled with an H, episode. Okay? This is one of the few parts of Beowulf for which we have a corresponding document. There is a fragment of a manuscript called the Finnsburg Fragment, okay, that tells part of this story of what happened at Finnsburg. It doesn't tell us the exact same scene as we have here, okay? But it was probably a pretty long story, 1,000 lines or so, all right? So what happens in this Finnsburg episode? We're told about the sons of Finn, how the sons of Finn surprised an ambush, 1068, when the hero of the Halfdanes, Hlaf the Shielding, had to fall in a Frisian slaughter. Okay, so we just had a bunch of names. So, first of all, who is Finn? Frisians, Finn is the leader. Shieldings, aka the Danes, who's their leader? Hnaf. Okay? Hnaf has a sister. Her name is Hilda. Okay? Hilda marries Finn. These two do not get along. Frisians and Shieldings. They do not get along. They do not like each other. They are in a period of open hostility. So why in the world does she marry him? Is this, the Montagues and the Capulets? Is this Romeo and Juliet? No. This is, louder. Diplomatic. This is a diplomatic marriage. This is a marriage to bridge two warring dynasties. I mean, this is Queen Victoria's children. who, got married throughout Europe and stuff and produced the spawn they have running around, Europe today and such. So, Hilda gets married to Finn. And we're told, indeed, she had no need to praise the good faith of the Jews. Guiltless she was, deprived of her dear ones in that shield play. Her sons and brothers sent forth to their fate. Not without cause did she mourn fate's decrees, the daughter of Hawk. So, she and Hnaf are the children of Hawk. Notice. They all alliterate. Okay? Hefting, Hrothgar, Hilda, unknown daughter. Hrethel, why do I keep forgetting these guys' names? The two older brothers. Helak, unnamed daughter. Okay? They all alliterate. Edgedale, Beowulf. Why doesn't his name alliterate? No, he is the direct son of Edgedale.
Well, is that not his original name?
No.
We don't know the name of the mother.
Yeah, but it wouldn't follow the mother's name. It would follow the father. I think it's because the poet is telling us Beowulf's not like us. There's a distinct difference there. Anyways, so what do we find out happens? She's married to him, so she's gone off to live with him, with the Frisians. Okay? And she brings a small group of retainers, her own retainers with her. Waiting men and women kind of a thing. So, one fine day, while she's living with Finn, her brother comes to visit. Now, who's her brother? King of the Shieldings. He doesn't come unarmed, and he doesn't come without a royal troop following him. But he comes, and he has a right-hand man. His right-hand man is named Hengist. Okay? And we're told, 1080, war took away all of the thanes of Finn, except a few, so that he could not continue at all a fight with Hengist on the battlefield. Well, why is he fighting Hengist on the battlefield? Because after Hnaf and his men arrived, war erupted at the home of the Frisians at Finnsburg. Burg, castle, defended place. Okay? War erupts. Most of Finn's men, we're told, are killed, but who else also dies? Red's a good color. Hnaf dies. Okay. And who else? Let's blue. Let's put Hilda over here. And these two have a son. I don't think his name. And he dies. How does the son and the uncle die? They apparently kill each other. Okay? Fourfold Germanic ethic: duty to the Lord, duty to kin, duty to avenge one's Lord and kin. Apparently, in Germanic society, as it's portrayed at least in the literature, the closest familial relationship was not father-son, mother-daughter, nor was it, go all Freud, mother-son, father-daughter. It was son, sister's brother, son, uncle, or nephew to uncle. Well, nephew, uncle. That's supposed to be the closest relationship. And we read accounts of this kind of son at a certain age, 7, 8 years old, going off to live with the uncle. For what purpose? Mom and dad are tired of him? Because he's a changeling? No. To teach that son how to be a warrior, how to be a man. Okay? But these two kill each other. So they kill each other, and Hengist becomes the leader of the Danes. But Hengist and his men can't just up and leave. Why? Because we're told winter has come and the rivers have frozen over. Okay, it's not like they're out on the coast. Okay? Wherever Finnsburg is, it is landlocked, but next to a river. And Knaf and his men came by boat. They didn't come over land. So, we're told, because Finn had most of his men dead, and he couldn't fight with Hengist on the battlefield, nor could the woeful remnant, that is, Hengist and his men, drive away the Princess Thane, they offered them terms. That is, he kind of offered surrender, but it's more like this. So Finn said, okay, here's the hall. We're going to hang a sheet down the middle of it, you know. This is the Scylding side. This is the Frisian side. And we'll get along for the winter. They swore oaths to each other. What were the oaths? We won't attack you, we won't attack you. 1095. They swore their pledges then on either side. A firm compact of peace. With unfeigned zeal, Finn swore his oaths to Hengist, pledged that he, with the consent of his counselors, would support with honor those sad survivors, and that none should break their pact in word or deed. That is, while you are living in my hall, we will support you, we will feed you, we will, etc. Okay? Nor through malice would any ever make mention, though they should serve their ring-giver's slayer, without a lord as they were led by need, and if by provoking any Frisian spoke, reminded them of all their murders. Hey, so, we'll serve you, we'll protect you, we'll feed you, we'll clothe you, and we're never going to remind you. Each one swore to the other, essentially, that you're a dirty, rotten, filthy, treasonous backstabber. Okay? They agreed. Oath was made ready. Ancient gold was brought from the hoard, that is distributed. And we're told the battle Scylding's best fighting man was ready for the fire. That's Knaf. Okay? So this is before all the compact, okay, is kind of sworn to. They get ready for the fire. Notice he gets burned on the funeral pyre with his nephew alongside him. Line 11, 14. Then Hilda commanded at Knaf's pyre that her own son be consigned to the flames to be burnt, flesh and bone. Placed on the pyre at his uncle's shoulder, the lady sang a sad lament. The warrior ascended. How did the warrior ascend? Did he get up off his funeral pyre? Was he only mostly dead? Felt the flames? Said, damn, that hurts. And get, you know. No, it's the smoke of his body. The ashes rising up into the air. To the clouds coiled the mighty funeral fire and roared before their mound there. And the Old English is really good. Their heads melted. Their gashes burst open, spurted blood, the deadly body bites. The flame devoured. Their glory departed. Okay? Then we're told, 1125, the warriors left to seek their native lands, bereft of friends to behold Frisia, their homes, high fortresses. Hengist still stayed there with Finn that slaughter-stained winter. Unwilling, desolate, he dreamt of home. But he couldn't do anything. Why? Because the frozen sea. But time goes by, spring comes, 1136, gone was the winter and fair of the bosom of earth. That is, grass is green, flowers are blooming. The exile burned to take leave of that court, that is Hengist. Yet more he thought of stern vengeance than of sea voyages. He really wants to leave, but he's thinking even more. Duty to avenge one's lord. I have got to avenge his death. How could he do that? So he did not refuse the world's custom when the son of Hunlaf placed a glinting sword, the best of battle flames, upon his lap. And you've got a gloss down there. We don't know who this son of Hunlaf is. Perhaps Guthlaf or Oslof, mentioned a few lines later. Perhaps not. Some retainers remained with Hengist and Finn's Hall, nursing their resentment. Some scholars take the Old English word hunlafing, ing, son, descendant of, okay, which is why Leuser translates this, the son of Hunlaf. Some scholars take hunlafing to be the name of a sword, in which case there are 3 named swords in the poem. Okay? We have possibly hunlafing, hrunting, which is the sword Unferth is very shortly going to give to Beowulf.
But it doesn't work.
Okay. We're told it's a good sword. And then we have Nyling, Beowulf's own sword. Nyling, son of nails. That's a good name for a sword. Okay. I don't remember what hurt means in Old English. So, what happens? They go to war, and the remnant of the Scyldings slaughter the remnant of the Finns. Who leaves? Who is, and I alone am escaped to tell thee, of the Finns? Hildebert. Hildebert leaves the land of the Finns, goes back to the Scyldings. Okay. Now, why do some scholars put a lot of interest in this little episode in the poem? It's because of this guy. If you read the entire portion of Bede in our textbook, I'm pretty sure this portion is in there, and where he talks about the coming of the Germanic tribes, he mentions 2 brothers, Hengist and his brother Horsa. Both names mean stallion. Studs. German studs coming over to colonize, And some have suggested the Hengist in the poem is the Hengist that Bede refers to. Okay? Timeline-wise, it fits. Because timeline-wise, this happens before the events of the story. Okay? The events of the story, the one datable event, the death of Helak. Approximately 520. Well, Hengist and Horsa would have come over approximately 450. So that story, that element could be true. Anyways, how does the Finnsburg episode end? Or what kind of story is this? How do you feel after reading this story? How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel like, wow, this is really great? Not really. What do we see at the heart of it? What? Say it again? Family warfare. Or the word the poet likes to use, feud. Feud is at the heart of that episode. Feud is at the heart of the poem, Beowulf. Even though the recent editor of the Norton Anthology of English Literature says in the introduction, feud is on the periphery of the poem. The most asinine statement that can be made. It's at the center of the poem. Why? Because feud is at the center of the problem with Grendel. Grendel is a descendant of Cain. Cain opened up a feud with God by killing his brother Abel. Okay? And then there's going to be all kinds of feuds go on. Look at the handout that I put up on the thing, guide to the characters and feuds. You get the characters and you find out they're at feud, warfare with X, Y, and Z. Okay? So, 1159. The lay was sung, the entertainer's song. Glad sounds rose again. Why? Well, that's not a very glad sound. So why sing this song? Okay? In The Lord of the Rings, and I think, because this poem influences everything in The Lord of the Rings. In The Lord of the Rings, just before Aragorn, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin meet the Black Riders for the first time, in the first volume, just outside Weathertop, they ask Aragorn to sing them a song, or Strider to sing them a song, and he does. He tells them the story of the Lay of Tinuviel, okay? Partly because it's ancestral history for him, and it's important for his future. But he says, It is a sad tale, as are all the tales of Middle Earth. Sad, but, he says, it can bolster your spirit. Well, why are all the tales of Middle Earth sad? Because you have to go back to, he must face much, both love and hate. He who long here endures this world in these days of strife. It's the quote, I think I've used it in here before, from one of my favorite films. What does the prince say to the princess in Princess Bride? Life is pain, Highness. Okay? Doesn't mean it's all bad. So, Wealhtheow comes forth. Okay, look at her name. You already know what the Theow part means, right? Anybody remember? Edgetheow.
Servant of the sword.
Okay, Edgetheow means servant of the sword. Edge is sword, so Theow means servant. So she is the it's actually spelled with a thorn. Wealhtheow. So what in the world does W-E-A-L-H mean? We have this in modern English. It just looks a little bit different, and it's pronounced a little bit different. It's actually the name of a country.
Wales?
Wales. This kind. Not this. Okay? Because this should actually be pronounced Wales. Originally, that's spelled H-W. All of our W-H words 700 years ago were all spelled H-W. Like who was who, how, hua, etc. Why the change? Because French doesn't begin any word with a sound. What's the difference between that and that? Modern English. Nothing. They're both pronounced our. Okay? Why do we not pronounce that? Because that comes from French. Okay? So, Wealhtheow comes forth. What's her name mean? Okay, we said Wales, but what does Wales mean?
Doesn't it mean like foreigner?
Bingo. Foreigner or exile. That's why the Welsh do not call themselves the Welsh. You don't like being called a foreigner in your own land or an exile in your own land. They are the Cymry, Brittonic or Celtic, and they live in Cymru, okay, which is the native language of the Welsh, but it's not Welsh, according to them. So, Wealhtheow comes forward in her golden crown to where the good two sat, nephew and uncle. Who are the good two? Hrothgar. So they're sitting, halls like this, big fire. Hrothgar sitting here, and Beowulf is probably sitting on either his left or right, I'm not sure which. Unferth is sitting down here at his feet. Okay. Unferth. Beowulf is here. Hrethric is here. Hrothmund is here. And then all the others are scattered around. And that's the fire. Okay. So she comes forth to where sat the two. Their peace was still whole then, each true to the other. Still whole then. Still then imply. But it wouldn't last. Okay? Likewise, the poet tells us, Unferth's spokesman sat at the foot of the shielding lord. And you've got your gloss there, Thula. It's not just spokesman. Court jester is an idiotic word, or translation for that. The Thula is kind of like the official record keeper. The court historian. He's the one who reaches back and says, I remember when. Okay. Spokesman, press secretary. This is Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Okay. And I know for people on a certain side of the political spectrum, this really is Sir Huckabee's, So, everyone trusted his spirit. Whose spirit? Unferth's. That he had great courage. This is what they trust. And then the poet says, not Beowulf, not somebody within the poem, but the poet declaiming this. Though to his kinsmen he had not been merciful in swordplay.
So, like, he did commit fratricide.
If you consider the poet as being authorial and authoritative, yes. Yes. Unfair killed somebody in his family. Okay? But again, notice this almost tableau-like image. Hrothgar, nephew, what did we just hear about? The nephew killing his uncle. And vice versa. And then him sitting at the feet of essentially both of them, and he's what? Kinslayer. Back to the beginning of Genesis. What does Hamlet famously say? Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. And where is it rotten? Not out here on the periphery. As Hagrid will say about the Malfoys in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, rotten to the core. Bad blood. Okay? So, Wealhtheow comes in, offers the cup to Beowulf. Says, to Hrothgar first. Take this cup, my noble, courteous lord, giver of treasure, be truly joyful, gold friend of men, speak to the Geats in mild words, as a man should do. That is, speak nicely to them. Don't go all Donald Trump and start, twittering on them. Be gracious to the Geats, mindful of the gifts which you now have from near and far. She's talking about the gifts you've given them. And be mindful of the gifts which you have, like in your royal treasury, which you've gotten from near and far. How did he get those? Scaring the hell out of the people near and far, so that they tribute to him. And then she says, I've been told that you take this warrior, and she kind of points to Beowulf, that you take this warrior for your son. Time out here. Heorot's cleansed. The Bright Ring Hall. Use your rewards while you can. Leave to your kinsmen, the folk and kingdom, that is the people and the kingdom, when you must go forth to face the Maker's decree. What is she saying? Leave something to your kids. This one and this one, who are just boys at this time. Probably somewhere between 5 and 15. 15 would be really pushing it. But I know that my own dear gracious Hrothgar will hold and honors these youths. Okay, keep in mind, who is she addressing specifically? Her husband, Hrothgar. But who's sitting right next to him? Hrothgar. So when she addresses Hrothgar, Hrothgar hears this. I know that my own dear gracious Hrothgar will hold and honors these youths, these two, if you should give up the world before him, friend of the Shieldings. What does she mean? I know he will respect them, uphold them, if you die. What? Before him. There's an implication in her words, or a slight challenge in her words. I expect, there's that word. Is that actually? I never thought about that before. 1184. No, the Old English is not ye be done. It is Wayna, which we still have. You see it sometimes archaically, 19th century and older, ween. I expect, I think, I believe, I know sometimes. what? That he will what? That he would wish to repay both our sons kindly if he recalls all the pleasures and honors we have shown him in our kindness since he was a child. Why since he was a child? Because he's been fostered here. Okay? She's implying, if you die before he does, I thoroughly expect him to treat our sons royally, with honor. Okay? So why does she say this? I mean, we could quote Hamlet again. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Does she really trust Hrothgar? See, I don't think she does. I think she's being sarcastic. Is this laden with innuendo? Is she actually saying, by how she says it, I don't trust Hrothgar to do these things? Okay. She turned to the bench where her boys sat, Hrothgar and Hrothmund, and the son of heroes, all the youths together. The good man, Beowulf the Gate, sat between the two brothers. See, I think by the poet telling us that she then turns to these two. You know, we're not talking a distance here of like 20 feet. We're talking probably like the distance maybe between me and Savannah. So that when she tells Hrothgar this stuff, Beowulf's sitting there, you know, elf-like pointy ears, you know, he's hearing everything. Okay? Because later on she's going to say almost the same thing. And she's going to appeal to Beowulf to protect her sons. She makes it much clearer in that later speech. Okay? So, more beer and wine are brought forth, and we're told, 1195 and following, the greatest neck collar ever heard of anywhere on earth. Okay, these other treasures that are now brought forth, these aren't from Hrothgar. These are Wealthyhouse treasures. She has her own treasure hoard. And she brings out, we're told, the greatest neck ring. What in Celtic would be called a torque. Okay? You get about one of these discovered every year in England. Some guys out there with his metal detector somewhere in England or Scotland or Ireland or Wales, and and the louder the bigger the mess. And they dig up some big old ring made out of gold, usually wound with several wires. Okay? It's open on one end. Why? So you can pull it open and close it. The end of the poem, just before the very end, Beowulf is going to take a ring off of his neck and give it to Elof. This is symbolic of the transfer of the kingship. Okay? And we're told how important this one is. Under heaven I have not heard tell of a better hoard treasure of heroes since Hama carried off to the bright city the Brosiga necklace, the gem and its treasures. We don't know what that's talking about. Hama, however, to the Anglo-Saxon audience who heard this, must have been familiar. It'd be like my mentioning the name Benedict Arnold. Immediately you have an idea. Okay? For us, however, who are separated from this by 1,000 years at least, that is one of those little references, drops off the radar screen. Okay? Ermenric we do know of. We got a gloss there. Nothing much is known of Hama, who apparently stole the necklace from Ermenric, famous king of the Goths. Bright City Eternal Council may refer to his retreat into a monastery and conversion to Christianity, that is Ermenric's. A story told in the Old Norse Theodric saga, and though this is not entirely certain. He fled the treachery of Ermenric, chose Eternal Council. And then the poet says, he let the Geet, on his last journey, had that neck ring. That is the one given to Beowulf. Nephew of Swerting went under the banner. He defended his booty, the spoils of slaughter. Fate struck him down when in his pride he went looking for woe, a feud with the Frisians. He went looking for woe. He did what? He started a feud. There hadn't been one. And Helak begins one. Okay? Helak's name. You'll hear it pronounced two different ways. Helak, the way I'm pronouncing it, and Hirjalak. Right? Well, the Hirja or Hia means mind or thought. Lak can be gift, but it's usually lack. Lack mind. Lack thought. Okay? Implying who's the smartest one in the bunch. Well, how not smartest one in the bunch is he? Well, he goes and starts a feud against the Frisians and dies. This is the first reference to Helak's famous Frisian raid. There are 3 of them in the poem. In other words, this is an important incident. The poet keeps coming back to it. Okay? Into Frankish hands came the life of that king, 1210. His breast garments, the great collar too. A lesser warrior looted the corpses mown down in battle. Geatish men held that killing field. Geatish men held that killing field. That implies Geatish men won the battle. They all died, except for one. We're going to be told later on who that one is. It's Beowulf. Okay? All the Geats died but Beowulf. Guess what? The Frisians die too. Why? Apparently Beowulf kills him. Because he plunders the body and he leaves, we're told, with 30 suits of armor. And how does he leave? He slings up those 30 suits of armor in one arm, and according to the Old English text, he then jumps in the ocean and swims. Dog paddles, I guess, with one arm. A couple of scholars have said, no, that's not really does. He rows across the ocean because, well, that's just silly, holding 30 suits of armor and swimming like 300 miles. You couldn't obviously do that. Well, who the hell could obviously do any of the stuff that Beowulf does? I mean, that's the part of the whole point of it. Okay? So, we're told, she then goes up to Beowulf and says, Beowulf, beloved warrior, wear this neck ring in good health and enjoy this war garment, treasure of people, prosper well. Be bold and clever. That's all fine. That's all, way to go, Beowulf. Here's a bunch of treasure. And to these boys, what boys? That is, to my sons, what? Be mild in counsel. Now that's a nice way of saying, don't wage war against my sons. I will remember you for that. That's her way of kind of saying, here's the down payment on the treasure. Be nice to my sons, and you'll have more. You have made it so that men will praise you far and near, forever and ever, as wide as the seas, home of the winds, surround the shores of earth. I mean, we're still reading about the guy, 1,000, 1,500 years later. Be while you live, blessed, O noblemen. I wish you well with these bright treasures. And now she kind of expands on what she was saying. Be to my sons kind in your deeds, keeping them in joys. Make my boys happy. Keep them happy. Here, each earl is true to the other. Now, that can mean these two. It can also mean the other knights, anachronistic term, thanes, the other thanes around the table. Okay? Each is true to the other, mild in his heart, loyal to his liege lord. That's Hrothgar. The thanes united, the nation alert, the troop having drunk at my table will do as I bid. That is, they listen to me. They listen to me. What's she implying? You're at the table. You listen to me too. But I think she's also saying, and I don't trust the one who's right down in front of me. Keep an eye on him. So she goes and sits down. It was a great feast, we're told. 12:33, the men drank wine. They did not know weird. What is weird? How do I translate weird? What will be, will be. Something's coming. The cruel fate which would come to pass for many an earl once evening came. Really? How many earls are going to die that evening? One. Okay? So they sit at their heads, the battle shields, etc., etc. They sink into sleep. One paid sorely for his evening rest, as had often happened when Grendel guarded their gold hall. It was an avenger, Grendel's mother. She comes, we're told she's a monstrous woman. She remembers her misery, that is that Grendel is dead. She dwelt in the cold streams ever since Cain killed with his blood his only brother, his father's kin. That doesn't mean she is as old as Cain. Okay? So, Cain, fled bloodstained, blah, 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 blah. From him awoke, and the poet again is telling us, from Cain come all these monsters and such. Okay? Until God stopped Grendel through Beowulf. So, she comes and takes one retainer. Now, how come Beowulf isn't in Heorot? Well, he's done the job he came for. So it's kind of like Hrothgar says, let's put you up in a little nicer room for the night. Even though Heorot should be the nicest room. But he's not there. She comes and she takes Asherah. Asherah is, Hrothgar's right-hand man. What does that phrase, right-hand man, mean? Is that the hand he holds when they go walking in the woods? No. Most trusted. The right hand, first of all, the right hand is the hand of power, the hand of authority. What's the left hand? What is Latin for left? Sinister. Literally. This is sinister. So all you lefties, no, sinister. Okay. It's also, the phrase alludes to the other phrase we use a lot that is, the meaning of it is completely lost. George Orwell said, never use a metaphor you've seen before. Politics in the English language. Read the essay if you've never read it. It's one of the best things written about writing. Never use a metaphor you've read before. We stand shoulder to shoulder. Really? I'll bet when Tony Blair said that in 9/11, he didn't have a clue what it meant. What does it mean? It means when you link arms. Okay? You link this arm, the other person's arm goes through here. What do you have here? Shield. 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 And as long as those arms stand linked, shoulder to shoulder, you cannot break that shield wall. It's impossible. Okay? It's only when some damn fool goes, let's go get him, that all hell breaks loose. So, Asherah was Hrothgar's shoulder-to-shoulder man. So, Beowulf comes in the morning and says, hey, Hrothgar, how's things going? You sleep well last night? Hrothgar, ask not of joys. Fit 20. Sorrow is renewed for the Danish people. Asherah is dead, elder brother of Irminlaf. We have no idea who Irminlaf is. My confidant, my counselor, my shoulder companion, every conflict, blah, 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 blah. And then he says, she avenged that feud. What feud? Line 1334, in which you killed Grendel yesterday evening in your violent way with a crush. Now, a sensitive person could take Hrothgar saying what? You're accusing me. Beowulf could take that as saying, what, stop. I did this? I opened a feud? Did Beowulf have any quote-unquote beef with Grendel? No, he didn't. What is Beowulf essentially? Modern terms. He's a mercenary. He's a hired gun. Okay? He had no beef with Grendel. We don't know if Grendel had a beef with Hrothgar and his people. So I'll take that back. He does have a little beef. Damn kids are playing their music too loud. I'm very Grindelish. So, he goes on and says, I've heard countrymen and counselors, 1345, report this. They've seen two such creatures walking the moors at night. One in the shape of a woman. And Beowulf's like, now you tell me. You didn't mention two monsters when I first came. And he gives us a description of where she lives. That murky land, 1357, they hold wolf-haunted slopes, windy headlands, awful fen paths, where the upland torrents plunge downward under the dark crags, the flood underground. It's not far, measured in miles, that the mere stands. Over it hangs a grove, hoar-frosted, firm-rooted wood looming over the water. Kind of eerie because this parallels the description in two other Old English manuscripts of a place. In fact, it's pretty clear. Either all three writers of the manuscripts knew this description from someplace else, or one is the source for the other two. Okay? One of the manuscripts is what's called Blickling Homily 17. Blickling is for the name of the house where the manuscript is reposited or lives, if you want. And the other one is the Visio St. Pauli, the vision of St. Paul. Okay? And in both of these, the description, anybody want to take a guess as to what it is? It's the entrance to hell. It's a vision of the entrance to hell. And Hrothgar's just described the entrance to hell as Grendel's home. Now that's pretty cool. I mean, again.
That is that whole borderland.
Yeah, whoever wrote this, it's like they were looking 1,000 years into the future going, you know, this can make a great film. let the Duffer Brothers behind Stranger Things put this, onto film because they do a good job. Keep Steven Spielberg as far away from it as possible. All the other idiots in Hollywood. So, he goes on and says, 1377, 78, 77. You do not yet know this fearful place where you might find the sinful creature. Seek it if you dare. I dare you, Beowulf. If you're really the monster killer you say you are, it's almost like I triple dog dare, You dare Beowulf, and what's going to happen?
He's going to do it.
I will reward you with ancient riches for that feud, as I did before, with twisted gold, if you return alive. Beowulf speaks. Notice he doesn't go, you dare me? Really? No. Sorrow not, wise one. Put that in modern English. Okay? Put even more modern English. Put it modern street English. Suck it up, old man. That's what he means. What's Hrothgar doing literally at this point? Okay, pity. He's sitting down again like he was 3 days ago. No, 2 days. Shut up. 2 days ago. Kind of, sackcloth and ashes. Oh, woe is me. God hates me. It'll never get any better. Asher's dead. It is always better to avenge one's friend than to mourn over much. Notice, he doesn't say it's always better to avenge one's friend than to mourn. It's okay to mourn. Don't do it over much. Parallels with Hamlet. What's the king's first big speech to Hamlet?
Everyone dies.
Your father died. Suck it up. His father died. His father before him died. You didn't see them walking around, black clothes, going, oh, woe is me, His mother says, cast off thy benighted color. Let your veiled lids look up. Quit looking at the ground, kicking the dirt. Okay? Beowulf's saying the same thing. It is better to do what? Strap on a sword and go kick some you-know-what. Okay? Than to mourn. Each of us, gnomic? I think so. Each of us must await the end of this world's life. There's the Hamlet stuff. Let him who can, if you're able to, do what? Bring about fame before death. How? Be a great warrior. Avenge your dead friend. Now, 62 years ago, Hrothgar was going, "Ah!" Now he's going, "I can't lift the sword." That is best for the unliving man after he is gone. And what happens? He says, "Arise, Kingdom's Guardian." If you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, what is this in Lord of the Rings? This is Gandalf speaking to Theoden in Meduseld. After he's kind of banished Scream of Wormtongue, and he's like, "Go outside, stand in the sunlight." And he does, and he kind of stands up. The whole stupid Peter Jackson thing with the possession and complete New Zealand nonsense. Okay? The old man leapt up, thanked the Lord, the mighty God, for that man's speech. "Oh, put some steel in my back, you know." So they saddle him up a horse. Notice, do they saddle him up a horse, give him a sword, and go, "Ride to battle, Hrothgar"? No. Beowulf and the others do. So they ride off to battle, and they follow the track to Grendel's Mere, and they come around like a bend in the road, and there's, a hillside or a cliffside, and sitting right there at about eye level is what? I mean, you got to manage, you got to, give credit to Grendel's mother. I mean, she understands presentation. There's Asher's head, just sitting there, looking at them. Gives them the willies, okay? They go, they find the water. There's sea serpents in the water. A guy tries to, kills one of the sea serpents. We're told stags would rather face baying hounds than jump in that water and try to swim away. What are baying hounds going to do? Rip them to shreds. That is a horrible way to die, whether you're a human or an animal. Okay? So, 1455. What does Unferth do? Not the smallest of powerful supports was that which Hrothgar's spokesman lent him at need. That hilted sword was named Hrunting, unique among ancient treasures. Its edge was iron, etched with poison stripes. That doesn't mean that he's dipped it in poison. This is talking about how the sword is made. It's what's called a pattern welded sword. You have several rods of iron that are beaten together, twisted while red hot, beaten together again, so that you end up with this wavy pattern up and down that looks like serpents. Okay? It's extremely hard to do and expensive. If you're ever interested in buying one, I can put you in contact with these guys in Latvia who make them today. And they're extremely expensive. They're like $1,500 a sword because they make them by hand. I'll just throw this up here. Just look up Northmen. These guys are the greatest craftsmen at the stuff they do. Swords, axes, daggers, wooden works, everything. And they're a little bit crazy too. So, he gives it to Beowulf. And Beowulf says, "Okay, so I'm going to do this. If I don't come back, do what? All the treasure you gave me, you don't get to keep it. Send it to Helak." Why? It's Helak's. It wasn't given, Beowulf is saying, it wasn't given to me. It was given to me to give to Helak. Why? The Thane-Lord relationship. What I win is the Lord's. What is it then incumbent upon the Lord to do? Give some back. Doesn't have to give it all back, but it has to give some back. And he says, "And let Unferth have that ancient heirloom, that well-known man have my wave-patterned sword. Unferth gave me his. If I don't come back, he can have mine." Notice Beowulf's implying, I'm going to go into this water, both swords. Okay? Actually, take that back. He is going to leave his. But he says, I'm going to take her into. He jumps in the water. Line 1495. It was the space of a day before he could perceive the bottom. No, it wasn't. It really wasn't. It was Tha was Queen Dias. Then was time of the day, or a time, or a space. Okay? And your gloss tells you, or it was daylight. No. What's it mean? The way it's traditionally been interpreted is it was the greater part of a day before he could perceive the bottom. He jumps in the water, and it takes him how long before he can perceive the bottom of the mirror? Well, the greater part of a day means what? Yeah. 12 hours and 1 minute. So he goes, it jumps in. Massive lung capacity, you know. What's this telling us? Sorry, I shouldn't do that with a sore throat. Okay, I don't want to imply it's not that he's not human. He is human. He's just more. He's not like the rest of it. He is, we've been told repeatedly, favored of God. Okay? Like, let's go all Old Testamental. Who's the guy with the long hair? You cut his hair? Samson. Samson has extraordinary human strength. I mean, he kills thousands with the jawbone of an ass. Or as my family likes to joke, the ass bone of a jaw, you know. Well, how big is the jawbone of an ass? About this big. Thousands means what? It doesn't take that many people to overwhelm one person. Now, if they're high on PCP, okay, yeah, takes a few more. But he's not. You got thousands of men, 30 or 40 piled on top. Just pile on top and stay there. He's going to die. Yeah, some of the guys down at the bottom are also going to die, but still. Okay? If God favors you, guess what? You can do things you didn't think you could do. Kind of thing, okay? So he goes down, and she grabs at him. His corselet protects him. She takes him down, and he goes, you know, it's kind of like this. Here's the surface of the water. He goes down, you know, here's the edge. You know, the mirror goes like this. He goes down, and here, there's an underwater cave. But it's not just an underwater cave, like, you know, put on scuba gear and go down to the Bahamas and stuff. Because what is there in this cave? Air. It's dry. How do we know it's dry? Well, he's going to perceive there's a fire in there. It's a nice little domestic kind of thing. So, he gets in there and he realizes where no harm, water could harm him in any way. What time is it, 11 o'clock? Yeah. And he sees a firelight, a glowing blaze, shining brightly. And then he sees her again. He gives a mighty blow with his battle sword that is fronting, and it doesn't bite. The edge failed the man and his need had endured many hand-to-hand meetings, often sheared through helmets, faded war garments. It was the first time that the fame of that precious treasure had failed. Now, I don't want to read too much into this, but I'm going to, because what have we been told about Unferth? Kinslayer. Did he use this sword to kill his kin? Possibly. We don't know that he didn't. And who is Beowulf now trying to kill with the kinslain sword, possibly? A descendant of a kinslayer. Are they canceling each other out? Or is it because,
You need something beyond.
okay,
This sword
is it
was
that?
working on Grendel.
Grendel, you couldn't use a sword on. He had spells woven about it. Does she have spells? Apparently not, because he is going to use a sword against her. So, doesn't do any good. But again, he's stalwart, not slow of zeal. He throws away the blade, 1533, and he trusts in his strength. The might of his hand grip. As a man should do if by his warfare he thinks to win, he cares nothing for his life. This implies Beowulf is kind of, not saying he has, kind of gone a little bit berserker. He's throwing all caution to the wind. And he grabs her, swung her around so she fell to the ground. Quickly, she gave him requital for that. She grapples him to her, and we're told, weary he stumbled, strongest of warriors, of foot soldiers, and took a fall. Okay. Strongest of warriors, of foot soldiers. I think this is Anglo-Saxon humor again. If he's the strongest of foot soldiers, modern, well, maybe not so modern, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, boxing. There is a famous boxer who used to taunt his opponents. Talked about being, like a butterfly and bee with his footwork. Muhammad Ali. Right? It would have been funny in a fight with Joe Frazier, in the Thriller in Manila, if Ali, doing his rope-a-dope and his footwork, had suddenly tripped. Because that's what happens to Beowulf. He's supposed to be best on his feet, and what happens? He trips. Right? And he falls. And what does she do? 1545. She set upon her hall guest and drew her knife. Set upon. What does that mean? She sees him down there, she pulls out her knife and goes all Norman Bates. That's what it implies. The Old English is she sat on him. He falls, she plops down on him, pulls out her sword, and starts stabbing at his chest. But he's got this nice coat of mail woven by Wayland the smith. Okay? Protects him. And we're told, and we'll stop with this, 1550, there, you get your 1940s radio announcer voice. There, the son of Edgedale would have ended his life under the wide ground. The Gatish champion had not his armored shirt offered him help. The hard battle net and holy God. Okay? It's not just the net shirt. And holy God brought about war victory. The wise Lord, ruler of the heavens, decided it rightly, easily, once he stood up again. Did God decide it rightly once Beowulf got up? In other words, God's up there in heaven going, come on, Beowulf, come on, you can do it. Get up, and then I'll help you. Or, because the word used there, it's not forethought, but it's like forethought. The word used there can be interpreted to be either it's the result or the cause. Okay? We'll pick up with 23. Did not get nearly as far as I'd hoped. We will finish Beowulf one day.